Okay, this is my course project video, a PowerPoint of everything that happened during the video, and I'll be saying everything that I had troubles with and what all happened during the project and all the soldering and all my issues. Started off with me just kind of taking pictures of what I had to show that I had everything. In this picture, you can see the battery and the charger plus a cord up there that was like a USB cord and the screen, along with the case for the screen. Um, I don't know exactly why it was there, but it held the screen in place, and everything else was attached to that little case area there. And then I showed the back of the whole tablet, plus the motherboard and the other battery, well, same battery, but uh, then I showed the antenna and the speakers, the cameras up there, the SD card reader, and the volume button chip is up there. And I ended up starting off with trying to get all the buttons in place first because they didn't really need screws at all. And since all the buttons were really small and I have really big fingers, it took me quite a while to get everything in place because it was all in a small, kind of like a slot area. You had to put um, all of the buttons in like a little hole. So the little holes were hard to get the buttons into, and then I had to rotate them to fit into the button slots. So it took me a while there, but I ended up getting it all ready. I took the little black, I think it was like a heat sink of sorts, but I took it and I ended up putting it on top of the chipset, and I ended up doing that because of the fact that it was just like a sticker, but after I put that on, I figured it wouldn't move or do anything, so I ended up going through and trying to put the motherboard on, but I found out that it was kind of wobbly and it wasn't attached to anything really. It just kind of dangled there. So I realized after going through and looking at the PowerPoint that the screen was in all of the pictures with the motherboard, but it never mentioned having the screen put in first. So I put it in and then continued on with the motherboard. When I got to the motherboard, I ended up having it all lined up, and I plugged in those two cables there. One of them is for the volume buttons, I believe, and one of them is for some power to the screen. So all of that being done was really, it didn't take too long to do all that. But after that, I tried to show that I put in the power button. I tried to unplug it and I tried to plug it back in using one hand, but it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. So this is the kind of the picture I got just to show that I was trying to at least. And then I went through and put in all these little, I screwed in like the clip things, I guess you can call them. They're just plastic plates that were screwed in and kind of went out over the screen there and held the screen in place to make sure that it didn't slide around or uh, wiggle around inside the case. And then I screwed in this little piece, which was basically the same thing, but it held in the motherboard at the same time, a little bit of the motherboard. And you can see that I have the volume button chip down there screwed in a little bit. I tried to get a picture of it, but it really didn't come out well. Right here you can see there it is, but it's blurry. It was screwed in on that one. I don't know why it turned out blurry, but it did. And then I made sure all the screws were lined up, and I pressed all the buttons to make sure they were clicking and not getting stuck on anything, and it all worked out well from there. I went ahead and screwed in the SD card reader and snapped a quick picture here of everything before I went and soldered it and picked up and went to solder. I started with trying to solder on the SD card reader. It didn't go too well. It's not the prettiest soldering job, and I'm pretty sure it didn't work. But at the same time, it really didn't matter. That wasn't a major part of it all. It didn't go too well. My soldering gun was I was told that my soldering gun was one of the good ones. There were four of them, and then there was one of them that didn't quite heat up the right way. After all of that went on and going through, um, I realized that the one that I had wasn't really heating up the solder that well. And I went over to this little piece here, and it took me um, actually like an hour to get this one piece soldered on. Um, the soldering job still isn't good. I got a whole lot of solder stuck to it, but none of the solder stuck to the board. And no matter how often I tried, my soldering gun never actually melted the solder enough to get it stuck to the board. Um, I decided maybe I just needed to let it sit and heat up. So I grabbed someone else's soldering gun while they were messing with something else and asked them if I could borrow it. Um, and then I barely tapped anything, and it ended up uh, it had some solder stuck to it. I didn't realize it soldered like that and actually stuck it to the board and left it like that. So it worked great. I realized my gun didn't quite work very well. Went over to the antenna. This is a closer picture of it. It's kind of blurry, but you can see I used the other soldering gun on the antenna, and it really helped out a lot. It soldered much better, and that actually only took me about 1 minute. It just was a tap tap, and it was done. So that really didn't take very long. It was much easier with the other soldering gun. And then I let the other guy have the soldering gun back. He ended up using it, was done within a minute or two, and I uh, changed out the two soldering guns and carried onto the speakers. And after the antenna, the speakers took just about the same time, just kind of tapped through. I understood the negative and positive, so I kind of knew where I was going at with the cords and cables. But throughout the entire time, I was just kind of aggravated with the other soldering gun. Here's another picture of how the cables kind of twisted around and looked after I put the battery underneath them. And I tried my hardest to make them neat, but I couldn't get anything but what this looks like right here. I carried on to the battery. The battery was kind of weird. Um, After trying really hard to do it, it was the cables were stiff like normal. It's normal for the cables of a battery to be a little stiff, but since they weren't really lining up correctly with what I was trying to do, they ended up taking a little longer than I thought, and it was harder to get them soldered on because I had to hold them, and it took me a few tries. I had to end up holding them down while the solder cooled off, and I didn't realize that the first few tries that the solder was going to rip off because the cables here were stiff and trying to bounce back up whenever I left them down. But after that, I was able to plug it in. I let it sit there for a good 30 seconds. I took 2 or 3 pictures. This was the best picture I got out of them all. And then I was letting it charge a little bit longer after that, and I tried to turn it on, and it gave me this battery, the charging screen. Even though I let it charge for about a minute, it gave me this screen. I left it for another 30 seconds, and it turned itself back off, and I had to re-hold the power button down, and it gave me the same exact screen. It didn't look any different. But there on the bottom, underneath the battery, was a purple line where I guess some of the backlight or something had been touched with a hot soldering gun, I guess, at some point, and it messed up the video a little bit. Uh, but then after that, I wasn't able to try anything else. The power button worked and the screen was working. That was all I got to see what was working. I didn't get to test out the volume buttons because it wouldn't get past the charging screen, and I wasn't able to see if the antenna worked because it once again wouldn't get past the charging screen. So after everything, I was just able to get to this screen. So it was fun. It was my first time ever soldering anything. So even after that, I was able to say that I soldered something. So I was happy with myself. Um, and the screen worked, and that was all I could ask for, is that it tried to turn on, and it didn't turn on all the way, but it tried. So that's that with all that stuff going on there. So I guess thanks for watching.